As of late, Lilith has been gradually increasing the power of secondary commanders, and these are commanders who work with anyone. They have great value for free-to-play players. So today, I'll be talking all about secondary commanders and giving you a top 5 list of the best secondary commanders in the whole of Rise of Kingdoms. If you are looking to invest in secondary commanders, this is definitely a video you should check out, since these commanders can be complicated, but they are really good for your account. So let's start off with what are the rankings based on, and basically, I'm basing it on what do those commanders bring to your mutable, how viable are they with every commander. Like, I'm not going to put a Joan Prime on the list, because she's only really good with cav commanders. I can't use her with an infantry commander and expect to trade well, so she doesn't get a place on the list. Are they bringing a lot to your mutable as a secondary commander? And do they have a very high cost? So if you're investing in a secondary, you probably don't want to unload 690 gold deads into them. So are they very usable at a certain skill level? Do they have a relic? Things like that I'm taking into account as well. So we'll just start off with the couple honorable mentions. I have about 2 of them. First, it's actually an archer commander, and this is Esong. And this is because pre-season of Conquest and even really early season of Conquest, you can put your Esong behind anyone. He only has one skill that requires archer stats, and this is his second skill where he gains 100% archer attack. He can still gain the rage, he just doesn't get the attack. That's the only difference this skill makes. So for the most part, Esong is a great secondary. You can use him with commanders like Nevsky, Scipio, Boudica Prime obviously. You can also use him with commanders such as Charles Martel KVK1, Richard KVK1, Alexander the Great in KVK2. All of these commanders are very, very good with Esong, and they're not even archer commanders. So I think Esong is definitely an amazing secondary and definitely holds a lot of viability as a versatile commander who can go with anyone. Now the next commander which I'm putting in honorable mentions is Joan of Arc, just the normal Joan, the epic Joan. And she's such a low investment cost. If you are running up to 5 marches and you want to really buff them, Joan is the way. The only thing is, she's very squishy. Like, if you're running a Joan and you get hit, that Joan's probably going to die, unless you have it behind, like, a tanky commander. And I mean something like a Constantine, basically only a Constantine that's just left its city and has its 18,000 heal. Without that, Joan is pretty much defenseless on the field, but she provides massive buffs. She gives either 30% health to infantry, 30% defense to calves, or 30% attack for archers. And then for 4 seconds, you also gain an additional 50 rage per second. Basically, she gives everyone in your mutable a rejuvenate effect the whole entire time. So really, really, really good skill there, but it's the only thing she's got. Yeah, she's got some increased normal attack, but for the most part, Joan is not the best field commander anymore. She's very outclassed. Though if you are running some mutable in KVK 2 and 3, she is one of the best secondary commanders you can get your hands on. One last honorable mention, and this is Frederick, and I think it's really because he has so much value in KVK 1, where if you just max his first skill, you're getting about 80% of his kit. Yeah, you're missing out on a little bit of healing, but literally who cares about healing? And then you're also missing out on some troop capacity, but you'll live. So using Frederick as a KVK 1 commander, if you've maxed his first skill, and only his first skill, you don't need to expertise him, is really, really good. On average, if you're running an unexpertise Frederick, you'll get around 2,000 damage factor per active skill, which is just straight up something that's going to carry you in a KVK 1, where the most damage factor is 1,700 to 5 targets, and that's on Esong. Frederick is one of your number 1 picks. He is going to be really good KVK 1, even somewhat in KVK 2. After that, unless you double relic him and expertise him, he's really not a commander that you should be using. Though for anyone in the early game, Frederick is really, really good if you just max his first skill, super low investment, and fairly good on the open field. So let's commence the top 5 list, and at rank 5 we have Mulan, because she buffs every troop basically. She's able to buff all allied troops within a circular area of effect. Not all of them, sorry, there's a limit. And she gives them 15% increased attack, defense, and health, and 25 increased march speed for 2 seconds. That is a boatload amount of stats. That's 45, 70% of stats total. If you exclude the march speed, 45% of stats, but even then 25% march speed. If you are dying on the open field and you know it's a lost battle, you dive your Mulan into the enemies, she's going to buff you, give you march speed, and your marchers can get away, and she's fairly tanky as well. Mulan herself takes 5% damage reduction while surrounded. She also has a chance to reduce the target's rage when she's attacked, so that's one thing that's going to help her sustain herself even longer. And then she also has a damage taken increased debuff for the target by 20%. Throw that with her double relic, which gives you even more damage reduction. You can see what I mean by Mulan is actually a very, very, very tanky commander. And she's also got a 20% troop health to all troops. So this is a very generic relic that is extremely powerful. So Mulan is going to be my rank 5 commander. The only issue with her is, yes, she can go with almost any commander, but her best pair is only Trajan. For most players, you're going to run her with a Trajan, but she's a commander that I just couldn't put on the top 5 because she is so powerful. If you're running her, you're probably running her with a Trajan. You could put her behind like a Martel or a Richard as well. Some of those tanky commanders are options for her. If you wanted to do damage, I mean, you could maybe put her behind like a CPO. I haven't really tested that, but most players run her really behind Trajan or Martel. Coming in at number 4, we have Ethelfled, and you can run her with almost anyone. Her best pair is a Trajan, but Ethelfled is the debuff queen. She has a 30% attack, defense, and health debuff on the opponents for 2 seconds. She does 800 damage factor to 5 targets. There is no reduction on this, so that's a total of 4,000 damage factor if you hit everyone. She's got a very large shape fanned area AoE, basically the exact shape of her bow right here. That's the shape of her AoE. And on top of that, she's got counterattack damage tech and reduction of 20%. She has a chance to inflict slow on the opponents when she's just attacking, so you'll be able to slow down your opponents. That's why a lot of people use either Saladin Ethelfled, because Saladin is able to slow, which gives Ethelfled's expertise even more value, because whenever Ethelfled's expertise, you deal 20% increased all damage to troops that are slowed down. Her slow is a 50% march speed reduction or a 30% march speed reduction on non-cavalry units. So once again, that's an amazing debuff. And then if you give her 3 or more unit types, she's able to deal an increased 20% attack. Yes, it's not necessary for her kit, but it's a nice extra bonus. And the best part about Ethelfled is from Expedition, you can get her for free. I maxed my Ethelfled for free. Everyone actually can only max her for free. You can't spend anything to get more Ethelfled heads. So Ethelfled is a literal free commander, and that's something else that really makes her valuable, especially if you're trying to run 4 or 5 marches early game or a really powerful march KVK 1, and Ethelfled is often run in the top 2 to 3 marches for a KVK 1 murder ball. I will also mention though with Ethelfled, her debuffs do not stack for the most part. Her second skill debuffs do, but her active skill debuffs do not stack, and it's only a 2-second buff, so it's nothing too crazy. And for the most part, her double Museum Relic probably isn't worth it to most players. If I were you, I wouldn't get it. It's only an increase of about 15% march speed and around 25% attack. So for most players, having her double relic isn't truly worth it, since it's very, very hard to get better relics nowadays, since these relic coins are going out of existence. Coming in at rank 3, we have Julius Caesar, and he works with basically any commander. First of all, his active skill, 30% increased all damage and an increase of 20% defense and attack. And the best part about his active skill is it lasts 5 seconds. Most commanders with a buff this powerful only last around 3 seconds nowadays, but Julius Caesar lasts 5 seconds. So this buff is really good, especially if you run in with someone like an XY or a commander with a fast rage cycle. Doesn't even matter who it is. If they got a fast rage cycle, Julius Caesar's active skill is going to be basically stacking forever, making you have 30% increased all damage forever, 40% basically total stats between attack and defense as well. That is a really good active skill, very generic. It doesn't really require any specific troop types, so that's something that really puts him at like a high place on this list. Also, Julius Caesar has a damage taken reduction of about 10% just all the time, and whenever he has less than 60% units, he gains a 10% chance to trigger an effect when attacked, which reduces his damage by another 30% for 3 seconds. Really good damage reduction there. That's another massive reduction. Like if you're looking at a massive reduction, you just don't look any further than Julius Caesar, because he's basically the most tanky commander in the game, especially if you get him below 60% units. He's going to be able to sustain himself on the field, and you'll be dealing a lot of punch with that increased all damage on his active skill. He also does have some troop capacity, which is always nice. Running extra troop capacity on the field is going to help you trade quite a bit better. Also, his expertise is not necessary. It just allows him to deal 400 damage factor. Basically useless, so if you want to run a Julius Caesar, you don't even have to expertise him. Like, for example, Mulan and Ethelfled, you kind of want to expertise him. But with Julius Caesar, 5511 is all you really need. You run a 5511 Julius Caesar, you're basically at his full potential. Yeah, you're missing out on the troop capacity, but most players don't really need that troop capacity. And also, you're missing out on the damage factor, but 400 damage factor, some commanders do that by just looking at the opponent. For example, ZHUGE is going to do that whenever he gets silenced. So 400 damage factor is not too crazy to be missing out on, and it's definitely still super good. Another thing that makes Caesar really good and kind of makes him one of the top commanders for secondaries is his relic. His double relic gives him an all damage increase of 20%. There is nothing in the game even close to this in terms of his relic. It is one of, if not the strongest relics out there currently. He also has 20% increased march speed, so if you put him behind a slow commander, let's say you're running him with ZHUGE, I've seen it work. I'm not a fan of it personally, but it's super fast. You'll be able to hit anyone you really want, and you'll still have a lot of all damage along with all of these extra buffs he's doing, so he's a great secondary commander. A little bit more niche, you can't run in with some commanders, but for the most part, Julius Caesar works with almost anyone. And coming in at rank 2, it's very tough for me to decide who's going to get rank 2 between Mehmed and Honda. And I'm going to have to say, for most players, it's actually Honda in rank 2. Now, the reason I placed Honda at rank 2 is just because his expertise is super valuable to his kit. Most players, if you want to run a Honda, you have to expertise him. And unlike any of the other commanders I mentioned on this list, Honda is Wheel of Fortune only. You can't get him in Mightiest Governor, you can't get him in like Legendary Tavern. He's Wheel of Fortune only and Gold Heads only. If you want to use a Honda, you're going to have to shell out those Gold Heads. So that's something that I'm not a fan of when you're running a Honda. Though Honda is definitely stronger than Mehmed, he's just much more expensive in terms of an investment. His active skill is only 3 targets. He does 1,250 damage factor when secondary. Primary, he does 2,500, but he costs more rage if he's a primary. So I wouldn't be running Honda primary. Though, when he's a secondary, he's dealing 1,250 damage in a fan-shaped area about the size of Ethelflaed's 2-3 at targets. It is reduced per target, by the way. Then with Honda, every single time he's attacking troops, he's going to gain around 40% increased attack, which is a really, really high number. And also, he has around 20% increased march speed at all times. Much like Julius Caesar there, really good to have this honor commander who you can run in the open field, and just if you get hit, kind of get away much quicker. And then Honda's third skill, probably his least useful skill. He takes 5% reduced ore damage, has a chance to deal 200 damage factor for around 2 seconds, and also reduce the target's march speed by 50%. So a lot like Ethelflaed there, he's kind of, as you've noticed, a mishmash between Ethelflaed. This is like Mehmed's active skill, and this is like Julius Caesar's skill. So very interesting commander. And then on his third skill, he gains 10% troop capacity, very much like most leadership commanders, and also deals 5% increased damage, skill damage, per 8% or 5% of units lost whenever you have more than 2 unit types. So if you only run 1 troop type, every 8% of units you lose, you will deal an extra 5% skill damage, or every 5% of units you lose when you're running more than 2 different troops, you will deal that extra 5% skill damage. The skill damage bonus cannot exceed 60%. So this is going to allow anyone who's running with to deal a lot more skill damage the lower they get. Usually it's the other way around, the lower your HP goes, the less skill damage you deal. But with Honda, you can kind of maintain that extremely high skill damage, which is really good. And then we already went over his expertise, where for 57 turns after leaving a city, he takes 30% less damage. One thing to note with this, a lot of people think it's 57 times per hour after leaving the city, but that means 57 times per hour. So if you leave your city for 2 hours, this effect will trigger twice. However, if you leave your city and then go back in and then go back out, this effect does reset. So you can basically do this forever within 10 minutes if you wanted. You could take 300 attacks, go back to your city, come back out. Every single time, he's going to have that normal attack reduction. Coming in at rank 1 is Mehmed, and he is basically free, like every other commander on this list. You can purchase Mehmed from the gold chest, you can purchase him from the daily bundle. You can even get Mehmed nowadays from Mightiest Governor and KVK 2 and 3. So Mehmed is a really, really easy commander to get. Most players will have some form of Mehmed by the time they reach Season of Conquest. Mine was 5511, hasn't really changed much since then, but he's been 5511 for quite a while, and that's where most of Mehmed's value lies. Mehmed has a 5-target AoE, unlike Honda's 3-target AoE, where he deals 1,150 damage factor. That's a very, very high amount of damage factor. It is reduced for each target, but still you're dealing around 4,000 damage factor here, where Honda is around 2,800, 2,900. Also, he's very, very good for rallying cities. So if you're rallying cities, Mehmed's actually quite good for that. Also, Mehmed has an attack bonus of 20% and skill damage bonus of 20%. You can see that's kind of like Honda. But with Mehmed, you get this whenever you're attacking. So you don't have to be attacking only players. You don't have to be lower on troops. So that's a really, really nice thing. Third skill is a rally skill. Fourth skill, he gains 10% troop capacity at all times. And then something else to do with rallies. And then when you expertise him, his damage factor once again goes up. And it goes up by about an extra 200 per target. Another thing that's really good with Mehmed is his Museum Relic. His Museum Relic is amazing, and it's probably one of, if not the best. It's kind of tied with Julius Caesar. Very hard to decide which one is better, because a double Mehmed Relic gives you 30% troop health. There is nothing close to that much troop health in any other relics, so Mehmed's Relic is insanely good. If you are running a Mehmed and you want to use him as a secondary commander, just get his Relic. You get him from either the Daily Bundle, the Mightiest Governor, or the Gold Chest, or I swear, just logging on, you're going to get Mehmed heads. Then you can just basically use him with any commander, so he's super accessible. That's really why I put him at rank 1. Yes, he'll probably lose to a Honda in a 1v1, but I like the accessibility of a Mehmed. If you are a whale though, Honda is probably your rank 1 because you will be able to just get him, who cares about the gold heads, and run him with anyone and he will be able to beat the Mehmed. Though Mehmed is super accessible, and if you are looking for a commander to go with anyone, maybe you're struggling to find a secondary, or maybe you don't have the gold heads for a secondary. Let's say you're running like a Boudica Prime, you don't have a secondary for her, you don't really want to get ZHUGE, you don't have the gold heads for it, just put a Mehmed behind her, she'll do fine. So that's why I really like Mehmed as a secondary. Same thing with Julius Caesar, same thing with Ethelflaed. All of these commanders basically fill in that role. Now, if you enjoyed today's video or you learned something new from today's video, even if you just enjoyed the sound of my voice, consider joining the Archer Syndicate Discord, which will be linked in the description and the pinned comment of today's video. I now just want to say I thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.